kinda hard to believe sometimes that the person who's supposed to run the country always seems to end up in some kind of debt. I mean, if they're running into debt themselves, how does anyone expect them to run a whole country? I'm your host, Michaela, and today I'll be telling you the top 10 richest presidents that went broke. And make sure to hit the like, comment, and subscribe button if you enjoy our videos because it really helps us out. But now let's get started. Number 10, Donald Trump. Former President Donald Trump came to fame as a bash New York real estate developer with an outrageous hairstyle, high-profile romantic exploits, and a gift for self-promotion. Trump inherited the family business from his father, Fred Trump, a successful New York City builder and landlord. 6 Trump-owned businesses filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the late 1990s and 2000s. 5 were gaming enterprises, including the famed Trump Taj Mahal and its parent company, Trump Hotels and Casinos Resorts. Most occurred during or following the major real estate downturns of the early 1990s and middle to late 2000s. The first bankruptcy filed in 1991 was arguably the most devastating for Trump's lifestyle. Trump funded the $1 billion Trump Taj Mahal with loads of high-interest debt. Within a year of opening, the property was more than $3 billion in the hole, and Trump was personally on the hook for $900 million. Trump Hotels and Casinos Resorts was more than $1.8 billion in debt when it first filed for Chapter 11 in 2004. So overall, to summarize, he's broke and a really stupid person. Number 9, William McKinley. Before he was president, William McKinley was so broke he almost quit politics completely. In 1891, after William McKinley had been elected governor of Ohio, a major financial institution came after him for approximately $130,000. A few years prior, McKinley had helped Robert Walker, a businessman and former associate, launch a business by co-signing a loan. The Panic of 1893 resulted in the demise of Walker's business, and little did McKinley know that Walker had taken advantage of his trusting nature and tricked him into assuming 100% responsibility of the loan. Walker went bankrupt and left the newly elected governor with the bill from the bank. McKinley was then going to resign as governor in order to go back to practicing law, where he could make more money. However, 2 of his political supporters, Mark Hanna and H.H. Colsatt, saw presidential potential in McKinley and raised the funds required to bail McKinley out. President William McKinley's financial burden serves as a constant reminder. Be careful when co-signing and try to always have super rich friends who can bail you out of a $100,000 jam. Number 8, George Washington. In the late 1760s, George Washington went completely broke when his tobacco farm flopped. Washington went into business with a British merchant named Robert Carey. Washington grew the tobacco and Carey distributed it. As you can probably guess, it did not go so well. Washington believed that Carey was selling his tobacco for too cheap and mismanaging his supplies. Within a few years of business, Washington's farm began to hemorrhage money. But Carey agreed to finance the whole endeavor on credit until Washington's business improved. Washington ultimately fell into so much debt that he began feeling like a prisoner. By 1773, Carey and Washington had an unsalvageable business relationship. The passing of Washington's daughter, along with the decision to diversify his crops, left Washington with just enough money to settle his debt. By 1774, he was able to settle his debt with Carey and sever all business ties with him. George Washington remained so poor that in order to go to Philadelphia to preside over the Constitutional Convention, he had to borrow money from George Mason. Number 7, Harry Truman. Harry S. Truman went broke well before he became president due to a failed business venture. In 1921, future President Truman and his business partner Eddie Jacobson opened a haberdashery called Truman and Jacobson Haberdashery. Business was initially great, as Truman and Jacobson were both veterans, and brought that military-grade work ethic into their shop. Unfortunately, no amount of hard work could have prepared the duo for the recession following the Great Depression, and in 1921 their business failed, leaving them both broke and nearly bankrupt. Truman refused to file for bankruptcy and insisted he back all his debts. He used connections made from his shop to land other jobs. He eventually paid off his debt in the 1930s. However, that wasn't the last of Truman's financial issues. In 1954, when Truman finished serving his second term as president, he had no savings, support, or income besides a $112 per month pension from the Army. Truman had lived without a significant source of income until 1958, when Eisenhower enacted the Former President's Act in 1958, which provided Truman with a presidential pension. Presidential historians often regard Truman as one of the least wealthy presidents in modern history. Number 6, Bill Clinton. When President Bill Clinton left office in 2001, he was burdened by major legal bills stemming from his infidelity scandal, impeachment trial, and action to suspend his law license. During his presidency, Clinton had to hire a group of defense attorneys and racked up to $16 million in debt. But in just his first year out of the White House, Clinton earned nearly $14 million, giving 57 speeches, and he managed to achieve solvency within 3 years. Number 5, Ulysses S. Grant. In the 1880s, Ulysses S. Grant lost practically every dollar he had to a Ponzi scheme. After losing his bid for re-election, Grant moved to New York City to go into business with Grant & Ward, an investment firm run by his son, Ulysses S. Grant Jr., and his business partner Ferdinand Ward. Ward was described as a young, charming people-pleaser with a talent for persuading investors to give up their money. Initially, Grant & Ward was a huge success. However, Grant Sr. soon discovered that Ward was taking investor money and using it to fund his own lavish lifestyle. In May 1884, Grant and Ward had failed, leaving the Civil War hero and former president absolutely broke. Desperate for money, Grant eventually turned to writing as a source of income. Unfortunately, in 1884, he was diagnosed with throat cancer due to years of smoking. Fearful he would leave his family completely broke, Grant immediately began furiously writing his autobiography. In 1885, Grant then passed almost immediately after finishing his memoirs. Though he never lived to see it, the book was successful enough to ensure his family's financial welfare. Number 4. James Monroe. Due to an extensive career in public positions that paid poorly and demanded expenses for entertainment and protocol, James Monroe was crushed with financial obligations when he left the White House after his second term. For the next several years, he spent time pursuing the government for thousands of dollars due to him for past services. Eventually, the government did pay him a portion of the funds he wanted, and Monroe was able to leave a sizable inheritance for his family when he passed in 1831. On July 4th, the third of 5 founding father presidents to do so. Number 3. Abraham Lincoln. In 1832, several years before he became president, Abraham Lincoln opened a business with a friend, but the business was unsuccessful and sank into the red. When the partner passed, Lincoln decided to bear the brunt of the debt rather than saddle his friend's grieving family with it. Creditors went after Lincoln in court, and the sheriff took his only remaining assets, his horse and some surveying gear. He was then efficiently bankrupt before today's bankruptcy laws were on the books. Number 2. James Garfield. James Garfield was probably the poorest man ever to become president. He was born in a log cabin, and his father passed when the future president was still a toddler. The family was then plunged into poverty. Garfield worked on canal boats and as a janitor and a carpenter to pay the bills while reading and studying his own before getting into college. He would become a professor, a lawyer, a minister, a Civil War hero, and finally president of the United States. Though he achieved the highest office in the land, Garfield still had very little money to his name when his life was cut short by an assassin's bullet in 1881. Number 1. Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson spent his life in perpetual debt, always borrowing money with the hopes of impressing his peers with expensive clothing, fine wines, and his house. Jefferson borrowed money from everyone, even one of his slaves. Can you believe the nerve this guy had? Other factors, however, definitely contributed to Jefferson's debt problem. For starters, his agricultural business ventures continued to drain him of money. He also inherited debt from his father-in-law's passing and a loan he co-signed. Things progressively got worse for Jefferson. He eventually took on new loans just to pay the interest on old loans. In 1826, Jefferson petitioned the Virginia legislature to sponsor a lottery for his belongings. While the legislature eventually approved this, it only raised a fraction of the money Jefferson needed. On July 4th, 1826, Jefferson had then passed with over $100,000 in debt. But that is all. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.